The clinking of the glass in his hand was the only sound echoing through the lavish penthouse until she hurled her umbrella, water droplets scattering like diamonds under the chandelier. "How could you do this to me?" Her voice trembled, every syllable a dagger aimed at a man who wouldn't flinch. Rain had chased her into the heart of the city that afternoon, umbrellas spinning like an unending carousel. Violet stood at the corner of Fifth and Monroe, her auburn curls damped with the relentless drizzle. Clerk by day at the dusty old bookshop on 7th, she was invisible in the gears of this sprawling, pulsing machine of a city. The floral scent of the nearby park was a whisper of spring and the crispness of fall, an essence only Violet would notice. Her senses attuned to beauty in the overlooked. Today, her worn-out shoes had trodden the cobblestones with determination, yet uncertainty. Days were predictable, wrapped in the safety of books, with tales more vibrant than any moment in her own life, until today when she had accidentally brushed hands with the stranger at the flower stall. He had been wearing a suit, but not the kind that made men look alike like factory molds. It was dark, not just in color but in the aura it carried. Yet, it commanded a glance, a double take, as if the material took on life the moment it moved. The man himself appeared sharply sculpted by something far sharper than fate, beginnings of a day-old stubble, eyes dark as midnight with disagreements. His gaze had snagged on a bouquet of dahlias and drifted to the solitary violet set aside. "Here," Violet's voice lilted into the air, hesitantly, offering the stark flower pulled from her own array. "This one looks lonesome." He had paused, more out of surprise than gratitude perhaps, accepting the bloom without a word. Their fingers never touched, but Violet felt a chill ripple, as if winter had exhaled. The stranger met her eyes briefly, a gaze that felt like he could see right through her shield of anonymity. It wasn't until she returned home, her bag heavy with groceries and thoughts heavier still, that the true weight of her day came crashing. There on her kitchen counter, a crisp envelope stood, unsent from where she had left it days ago, her landlord's notice. The deadline loomed like a specter in her mind. Days began to blend with worry, the rain persistent in its fall. The bookshop, too, seemed suffocated by its usual clientele, the thrill of paperback adventures unable to lighten her gloom. And there in that cocoon of comfort, the strange but handsome visage of the flower recipient haunted her idle thoughts, a mystery burgeoning under the fabric of her routine. On the 5th day after their brief exchange, a silence bounded into the shop as an unusual gust of patrons entered, the kind of individuals whose presence bent the neighborhood into whispers, tailored suits, and guarded smiles, the antithesis of her eternal solitude. They were led by a familiar silhouette, the same gravitational pull wrapped in a tailored darkness that transcended clothing. Her crimson-dusted cheeks betrayed her swift recognition, while her mind whirled trying to grasp any sense of reality. To her horror, those very patrons now surrounded her, led by the stranger who held the violet like a talisman. "Miss Jensen, you seem surprised," his voice murmured, smooth yet edged like a blade in moonlight. "We have a proposition for you." Violet's eyes met his and then the men around him, faces immovable as statues, yet she could sense it, the expectation of discomfort, the arrogance of unchallenged certainty. The crisis loomed, surrounded her, until the weight became almost tangible. It was a tantalizing nightmare framed in reality, the kind that sent ripples through the still water of her quiet life and whispered unlikely truths about survival. She found herself nodding along to words that seemed both unending and yet immediate, a pact forged in shadows she could scarcely understand. As the minutes dripped into hours, Violet's perception began to shift unabashedly in the crystalline coldness of their control, and she saw the alignment of lives starkly different, yet now interwoven. In the recesses of her mind, a plan was etching itself, quietly crafting worlds once dreamt, the vivid realities she'd only read of. The night they parted, she'd gathered the courage from somewhere bone deep. The small act of offering the lone violet had set her atop a spiral of secrets and sham truths. And in turn, his departure, typical of shadows, left a void as chilling as frost on window panes. Yet, as he crossed the threshold, with his enigmatic presence trailing behind like scent on the wind, he turned, cradling her curiosity and fear in one solitary, dangerous promise. "The flower, it won't wither," he assured, a whisper enveloping like silk. It was more than an end. It was a beginning lurking just behind the facade of silence and livelihoods. Their worlds were rearranging deliberately, dramatically, and perhaps devastatingly. At the edge of the night's embrace, his last words lingered like an unsated dream. "You'll know where to find me." The distant siren wailed in the night like a wolf calling to its pack, urging them to gather. Violet couldn't shake the sound from her bones as she stared down at the suitcase of money spilling onto her kitchen floor. This wasn't just her ticket out of mediocrity. It was an alarm begging to be noticed. Each bill fluttered like a dying leaf in the autumn of her innocence. They told her to hold on to Ida, temporary measure, the boss had said, his words like smooth pebbles skipping across a turbulent lake. The suitcase was heavy, not just with currency, but with impending choice. She picked up one of the bills, rubbing its coarse surface between her fingers, feeling the grit and grease of a world she had only brushed up against. It bore the weight of promise and peril, tightrope strung perilously above the abyss of her new reality. The scent of tobacco lingered on the notes, mixed with a hint of leather. Violet shivered, reminded of the man with midnight eyes. In the reflection of a teacup left unwashed, she saw not the timid shopgirl familiar with paperbacks and faded clothes, but a visage marked by destiny's hand. Just days ago, her life was a sepia photograph, dulled by the monotonous rub of sameness. How quickly the colors had bled onto the canvas of her existence. She recalled the stiffness of the room when they had arrived, when she was presented not with a question, but a fait accompli. There was no refusing a proposition laid bare by men who swam in seas of moral ambiguity. They had all the assurance of seasoned predators, leaving no margin for second thoughts. Days of deliberation blurred together, an improbable mix of quiet rebellion softened by the siren call of security. Conversations with herself rivaled old tales from the shop's darkest corners, and yet she was entangled in something more profound, more palpable than fiction. Was the flower she offered merely an accident, or a step preordained by an unseen playwright lurking in shadows? The streetlights outside flickered, casting elongated shadows through the rain-slicked windows. Each droplet was a timer counting down to a fate of her own making. It was beyond choice now. The city outside reverberated with its usual life, ignorant of the intricate web she now inhabited. The evening had crept in like a thief, and the suitcase lay unclaimed by the kitchen table, a grim repository of what she hadn't dared to contemplate. The boss would return. She knew it like she knew the rhythm of her own heart. Anxiety punched through chiseled walls of resolve as Violet settled at the window, packing the suitcase reluctantly shut. Countless questions of morality and safety weighed her down. Could she navigate this path without losing the essence of who she was? A gentle knock echoed in the desolate corridors of her mind. Her heart stuttered with recognition. The silhouetted figure had returned, an emissary back from realms of dusky dealing. He stepped through the threshold, removing his fedora, fingers brushing the brim in unspoken greeting. "Have you considered our offer?" His voice was a sonata of confidence and subtle menace, each word crafted to thread into Violet's soul, piercing the shroud enveloping her ideals. "Yes," she breathed, chest tight with an unspoken answer. "Hook." She spoke it aloud to believe in it, to bind herself to it, like a whispered incantation meant to ward off evil spirits. He tilted his head, an unknowable shadow cast over his aquiline features. "Then you understand the terms." There was no room for misinterpretation, not when the stakes were buoyed on searing certainty. Yet his gaze softened, and for a moment the man rendered enigmatic by fate's fickleness appeared almost human. "You're different, Miss Jensen. A rarity in this world," he articulated, studying her with curious intensity. Her laughter was hollow, more a reflection of irony than humor. "A rare breed? In what world am I anything but ordinary?" His response was merely a shrug, a gesture that bordered on paternal approvals, small comforts given freely, only to firm chains that held her future captive. With every transaction made, each handshake, every clandestine nod, Violet was animated by the beating heart of contradictions. They reconciled her with guilt and gladness. Threads, sustenance, and debt all basted into the hem of her unfolding story. And then, as someone carved from the mistakes of past confessions, her certainty blossomed into understanding of the pact she'd forged. His hand, steady as granite, lingered over her unexpectedly warm, undeniably present. The violet flower you gifted me, it was not a lonesome thing. You kept it? Her surprise startled her own voice, and for an instant, walls dissolved under the weight of human connection. Yes, it means something now, a reminder that choices, even small ones, bear consequence. He released her, untangling from the moment the way that shadows shrink when light surfaces beyond city edges. Keep the flower. Keep the hope, he murmured, sightline catching on something beyond her shoulder. Before she could question further, the room was submerged in a new tension, a scene set not with words but with a silence too loud, too immediate to ignore. Outside, on the cusp of their parting, the world tilted. An unanticipated revelation lurked just beyond the horizon, one she found all too haunting, forged by words not yet spoken. As the velvet of twilight closed them in, the anticipation was drumming at her heart, audible in turns at the back of her mind. His departing gesture was slight, but stained with finality, the briefest lingering touch on the suitcase, a symbol entwined with everything yet to come. Cliffhanger. Don't look inside unless you're ready to see ours entwined, he whispered before stepping into the mosaic rain, trailing the scent of another life. A vase shattered in an ear-splitting crash as she struggled to maintain composure. The tightrope she walked was razored with uncertainty, slicing through any remaining veneer of control she thought she possessed. In the stillness between shards of porcelain, Violet considered the specters of memory that flitted about like ghosts in the evening glow. Outside, autumn leaves performed their final dance, spinning in rhythmic farewell to the rustling trees, mirroring her own spiraling thoughts. The apartment was a small remnant of asylum, 2 rooms with creaky floorboards, chipped white paint, and an ancient radiator that clanged in defiance of the season's chill. It held memories barely woven, yet it thrummed with secrets embedded into the walls, absorbed with every whispered confession. Violet, with her ginger warmth and lavender scent, stood in stark contrast to this dim haven. She was a living tuft of color in a world painted in grayscale, curiosity and caution woven into her tapestry of being. Every morning began with the crackling of radio static and the scent of jasmine tea, the one indulgence she allowed herself, its fragrance perfuming her solitude with fleeting hints of spring. Back at the bookshop, Mr. Ellis never understood why the headlines of the world fascinated her when the stories in his shop enthralled less and less. Stick to fiction, he'd smirk, his eyes over horn-rimmed glasses. It's safer. But today, the pages of fiction where she sought refuge couldn't escape the shadow of the suitcase. It lay beneath the bed, its presence pulsing against her conscience, as profound and inscrutable as its benefactor. She encountered his eyes everywhere she went, tucked into the creases of passers-by's curious gazes or in the reflection of shop windows' eyes that deciphered and debated, that drew conclusions that demanded reckoning. The urgency to maintain normalcy became a futile exercise. Roses in her cheek wilted under the pressure of decision, leaving whispers of the vibrant woman she claimed to be. Then came the crisis, unbidden and unexplained, wrapped in the thin paper of anonymity. The phone call was brief, curt. A request wielded as mandate. Her presence was asked-no, commanded to once more meet the emissaries whose world licked at her foundations like the flame at kindling. Their entrance onto sacred ground, her bookshop, felt like a rude invasion. Grandstands were erected in the casual posture of men accustomed to control, and Violet nodded as her voice bent but didn't break. A masquerade of civilities painted over ulterior motives, setting the ebbs and flows of the dispute into keen relief. "Your answer," the man asked, leaning forward into pools of dim light. With each syllable crafted, a dance of diction lilted under the looming consequence of deception or decision, until, yes, Violet responded dryly, her determination as fragile as glass. The agreement was drawn not in ink, but in charcoal lines of morality sharply delineating her from them until the lines blurred into grays. The obstacles manifested subtly in email, a meeting at midnight, whispers of loyalty and betrayal woven into sleeves of monosyllabic urgency. Blindfolded trust became a cloak she was made to wear, emboldened by the uncertain gift of time. Within eerie silences, their conversation was punctuated, short breaths of anxious delay. Violet unearthed hidden tapestries of bravery, a calculation of her soul's worth measured in silence's currency. Finally arose the moment the flower promised. Not in the shopping quarter where talks lingered, but in the labyrinth of alleyways infused with acrid scents of the city's underbelly. Invisible laws dictated the residents here. The only justice knew gray morality. The echo of footsteps traced their movements like a haunting scrawl, unending and with intention. The reveled twist, curled low, coiled ready, came not as word nor deed, but in the barest touch of paper against her palm, passed imperceptibly, a token of shared knowledge cloaked in desperate trust. The letter, that clandestine note exchanged somewhere between plea and resolve, spoke of uncertainty made robust by acceptance. An address, hastily scrawled, a coda deciphered by necessity, not familiarity. With the understanding of its contained possibilities sharpened through fear, Violet's heart sang a requiem for the safety she never noticed she was losing. In the heart of her evening, where grim realities crept out to plague her, one reality poised to reach out and touch her encroaching fear. The climax, severe in its grace, punctuated the enormity of her circumstance, mirages of mistaken orders, skeletons in closets, revealed amidst foggy cloudscapes of thought. The moment the midnight bell tolled in her chest, truth, audacious as the dawn, released her from the chrysalis of indecision. Resolve settled featherlight on her shoulders, yet heavy with promise, a declaration of gathering strength. In this silent night's denouement, she realized bravery was a quiet companion walking alongside fate's caprice. The culmination was neither in rejection nor embrace. It was a marriage of necessity and desire born out of uncertainty. The season's changing, she murmured aloud, an irony that settled into the lines between words. It was then the lingering specter appeared, not cast by shadow but bathed in dusk's amber glow, spilling in from the street lamps, swinging in the steady breeze. And with clarity found only in the better tales of one's life, she asked no questions, voiced no demands, not when the answers were held delicately in that weather-worn envelope, a talisman anchoring her to inevitability. In the multi-shaded tapestry of her quiet humility, Violet was left with her reckoning. Ready or not, she prepared to surrender fear at the altar of pursuit, to step onto the path hewn from tangled existence, an invitation written into each footfall. A line crossed, a parting shadow, a voice soft on dilemmas. "Don't worry about the dark," whispered an unclaimed echo. "I'll bring the light." The gunfire was muted by the snowfall, each shot a ghostly crack evaporating in the air before reaching her ears. A chill that wasn't entirely from the cold ran down Violet's spine as she pressed herself into the alley's shadows. Her fingers clutched the rough brick wall with a desperation that was becoming too familiar. It had started as another day at the bookshop, stacks of novels to organize and pages to vanish into when customers became too scarce. Violet had welcomed the routine, finding solace in its predictability amidst the storm of her secret dealings. The city, a concrete labyrinth that thrived on the noisy dance of taxis and pedestrians, had been unusually silent that morning. Snow flocked everything in monochrome, softening edges and dulling colors to a pensive quiet. She felt it in the air, the unsung tension, like the pause before an orchestra played its first note. Now, kneeling in the alley with her heart pounding against her ribs, Violet's mind skittered through the day's unraveling events. An innocuous stack of letters at the bookshop had hidden between their lines a message from the organization. It seemed every mundane detail was now poised to explode into catastrophe. The stranger from the coffee shop 2 blocks down had given her a look too long, too scrutinizing. The barista's hands had trembled as she returned her change. Every little interaction poked her anxiety, tightening the coil that wound around her sense of normalcy. Then there had been the phone call. Its cryptic message, spoken in hushed urgency. "Tonight, East End, be ready." Each word had inked itself into her memory, graffiti on the untouched walls of her morality. Time stretched elastic between her understanding and need, forming a single thread of awareness to hold on to. The deeper she dove into this life, the more she feared drowning in it. Increasingly, the lines between threat and promise, between help and hindrance, blurred intolerably. As daylight faded, an invitation was offered not with verbal niceties, but with demand. It was time for a proving ground, a test that left little room for her usual quiet refusals. Stepping into the night, the cold air hit her senses like a jolt. The address she had been given was a nondescript warehouse near the river, forgotten by time and reclaimed by the city's underbelly. Inside, flickering halogen lights strained against the creeping shadows, outlining shapes of crates and rusting machinery. It was here that she would meet him again, the man whose strides in business and legend carved whispers into the granite corridors of power. His entrance was a careful orchestration, all confident lines and shadowed presence. The other players in this darkly spun tale fell silent, shuffling aside like puppets resigned to the strings. He approached her without hesitation, each step echoing authority. "You came," he noted, his voice still a sonorous symphony bearing layered promises. "There's something you need to understand." The air thickened with the weight of impending revelation. Violet felt its gravity pulling her deeper into his world, a realm where even trust was currency to be bartered. Her curiosity, lethal and tempting, forced her forward, made her weightless as she walked the delicate balance between need and danger. And then, amidst the shifting shadows and silence that spoke more than words ever could, he handed her a simple, objecta leather-bound book. Its cover, worn by years but resilient, held an inscription she couldn't decipher, embossed in a gilded script. "It's time you knew," he told her, an impossible gentleness framing his command. Violet hesitated, the book heavy in her grasp. Yet, within its spine lay a secret he meant for her to unravel. Pages whispered as they turned under her fingertips, each word sketching a lineage of power and betrayal, unmasking alliances forged in clandestine agendas. This was the heart of all she'd fallen into. This ledger, this map detailed her new universe, chronicling connections and decisions that knitted everyone together in this unseen tapestry of influence. "Everything is here," he indicated with the nod, his eyes casting shadows of truth upon her unease. "Your role, my objectives, their hopes, all written for those who dare to read." Violet, feeling the urgency of her place within these pages, allowed herself a moment of decision. To read or to reject, to learn or to remain encased in darkness. Here was her crossroads, poignant and undeniable. Her commitment, forged stronger than fear, drove her resolve. She dove into the words as if they held the air she needed to breathe. As the nights passed, sitting alone in the amber glow of her apartment's solitary lamp, Violet absorbed the ledger's revelations, an unfiltered history of power dynamics she had only tasted the shadow of. The fragrance of jasmine clung comfortingly to the air as she traced over who had been crossed, who stood ascendant, and who lay hidden in the seams of society's fabric. The magnitude of her entanglements became a melody she learned to sing, harmonizing fear with determination. Yet, the further she read, the more she perceived alternative truths sidelong to those facts. There were omissions, gaps meant to conceal. She deduced allies from shadows, veiled threats in between lines of financial debts. Understanding now transcended caution. Here was her minor power, her symbol of ascendant perseverance, it expressed through ink and time. One night there was a knock too familiar to ignore. He stood enveloped in the night silence, lending warmth within the iciness of the threshold. "You've read it?" he asked, his voice tinged with the intimacy of shared confidences. "Yes." "Then you see why we must act." Violet nodded slowly, a resolve now budding from roots planted long ago by a solitary flower's giving nature. They spoke of plans and possibilities, binding whispers shared beneath the muted generals of snow. Her role had been clarified, intentions refined in the kiln of knowledge till they rang true. It demanded courage, an iron heart tempered by grace. Upon his departure, night closed in with vibrant intensity, yet in Violet stirred the first flush of dawn. It was the convergence of things brought to bear by the chaos of reality. Her determination, seated now by understanding, took root. In the depth of that moment, she embraced her choice, not for him, not purely, but for herself, to reclaim ownership of her path, to entwine fate with a breath of will. At parting, his look offered only promise, devoid of deceit. The night's veil whispered over them, piqued by the melodies of intention, and she was left with the calm assurance of forward momentum. Now, as she stood resolute in the crystallized air vacated by his silhouette, a lone, spectral figure emerged through receding snowflakes, cloaked in determination. The solitary light behind her flickered briefly, a beacon igniting with unstoppable clarity. As the past echo folded into the present, she could finally hear it avow, resonating beneath the silence of snowfall. "See you in the light," it lingered, undeniably present. It came as a whisper, but with the power of a storm, the woman murmured, tracing the delicate rim of her teacup as the aroma of jasmine curled languidly into the morning air. Outside, snowflakes danced like spirits, reminding her of everything that was slowly slipping through her fingers. Violet stood by the window, watching the world unravel from the safety of her solitary bookshop haven. Her auburn curls caught the light, framing a face marked by countless quiet battles. She was an unassuming figure in her woolen sweater, with the exception of her eyes pools of deep contemplation and silent resolve. The store was a sanctuary thick with understanding, lined with books ranging from adventure to romance, and tinged with an old paper musk that promised hidden stories waiting to be discovered. Here, she felt like a caretaker of worlds, though her own was on the brink of unimaginable change. The knock on the door shattered her reverie. It was loud, confident, a prelude to something unexpected. The air shifted around her, scarred by the promise of tension. Fingers trembling subtly, Violet moved through the narrow aisles past stacks of classics and thrillers, her breath a silent prayer for composure. At the entrance stood a figure draped in promises of shadow, cloaked so heavily that the light itself seemed to hesitate before touching him. He stepped inside, melting into a shape she recognized but had hoped to avoid. The man with midnight eyes, around whom her life had begun rearranging itself. "Miss Jensen," he greeted, a note of familiarity wrapping around his words like velvet in a winter chill. She nodded, swallowing the flurry of thoughts scrambling to the surface. "What do you want from me today?" Assurance. His presence was remarkable, commanding attention with each word designed to solicit compliance without force. The word hovered between them, entwined with a suggestive authority that seemed as breathless as dangerous. But Violet was no stranger to the language of complex motives. "Assurance," she repeated softly, feeling the weight of it thudding against her ribs. "Or obedience?" His smile was brief, shadowed by unspoken things. "You're wiser than the others believe, Violet." In that moment, the world around them seemed to contract into a nexus of trust and doubt. Each held as much weight as the other, tangible in the crisp certainty. He presented her with an envelope, thick with what had to be contracts, promises laid down in ink and obligation. Violet accepted without breaking eye contact, sensing destiny teasing the edges of her decision. "Our dealings require fortitude," he added, his voice imbued with the unyielding tones of fate's envoy. She felt the edges of her resolve harden and then melt again. Her truth, once clear-cut, was a pulsating thing now, shifting shapefully against her soul. The contradictions settled deep. She understood, while she could hold her ground, ultimately, she was part of something much larger than herself. Either path held shadows, the difference was in how brightly she dared to ignite. Her life had evolved into tightrope walks of muted majesty and unresolved challenges, specters she danced with knowingly, even in this solitary chamber of written words. That night, the streetlights threw their gaze into the cobblestones, illuminating the paths of dreams yet remembered. Violet saw shadows move alongside certainty's light companions of her bleakest hours and earliest dawns. But even shadow needs light to exist. As the evening's grasp loosened, she sought solace in the small ritual of wrapping herself in the aroma of jasmine tea, a gentle testament to continuity's balm in times of upheaval. She opened the envelope, her heart a drum against her ribcage, propelling her into the narrative written by someone she hadn't chosen to trust. Each page is a silent roar echoing with decisions demanded under duress. Promises were bound within those creases, warnings camouflaged between crisp sentences. Her role as placeholder of precarious balance demanded not just intellect, but courage molded through whispered suffering. "Careful," she whispered to the seated specter of her future, recognizing the stress-tremored need to lean into something greater, something permanent. The night fanned out like ink across paper, each hour a storm cloud pressing its weight onto slumber's architecture. As she pondered the weight of her chosen fate, the evening seemed to stretch infinitely, its arms wrapping around her in that shop where bindings contained more truths than safety possibly could. Breathing slowly, she tucked the mysterious documents away, binding her contemplation with resolution. And then, like a specter called forth by thought alone, he stood at her door once more, his silhouette etched against the backdrop of snowfall, a postcard from Providence. "Your decision has consequences," he murmured, offering a hand. "Are you prepared?" Violet felt fear gnaw gently at the edges of her calm, but acknowledged it with a nod. "Yes," she answered before realization swept through a countless universe of worry and hope suspended in her simple acceptance. With a certainty born of nights lingered longer under the spell of introspection, she took his hand, feeling worlds align around their touch. They were both trying to navigate destinies pre-carved by choices and chance. The city stretched out beneath them, an unfolding tapestry where ambition met uncertainty in a dance of fractured wills. Together they crossed into the snowy dark, symbols of unspoken unity amidst shimmering divisions. "You and I," he began softly, making the promise feel like a continuation of something ancient. "We are part of a story that's only begun." Violet nodded, inhaling the winter's breath. "Then let us see it unfold," she agreed, aware of the echoes of consequence awaiting at each turn. And as shadows moved, creeping toward their unconsidered futures, Violet clung to the beauty of ephemeral light, a moment of grace, a fragment from which eternal meanings could be forged. His hand brushed hers once more, fleetingly memorized by warmth. "Remember," he instructed softly, "the dark won't always be isn't forever." They walked side by side as the night veiled her reflections, leaving behind a whispered testimony, a trail of fates intertwined against the snowy theater of life unspooled, a distant sound cut through, a curiosity of melody echoing back through the air. She paused, momentarily startled by the siren's distant hymn sound drenched in future tension. "Are we too late? Or just in time?" His words drifted into the silence, swaying between question and declaration. The night, alive with mystery, held its breath. Violet felt the answer tickling her consciousness, awaiting discovery in the dawning horizon. A single tear slipped down her cheek, cutting through the layers of resolve she had built so carefully. The bitter sting of betrayal was fresh on her lips, but it was the silence that screamed the loudest. The moment she stepped into the dimly lit warehouse, Violet knew she was in the lion's den, surrounded by wolves masquerading as allies. The new players on this stage, with their perfectly tailored suits and polished smiles, were unfamiliar, yet they wore the same air of unfaltering authority as the man who had first drawn her into this world. Everything about the meeting was choreographed, the words precise, the gestures deliberate. They spoke of logistics, alliances, profit margins, all underpinned by something darker, more insidious. Yet, amidst their strategic dialogues, Violet sensed an unspoken agenda weaving its poison through the conversation. She hadn't yet decided if trusting him had been her saving or her ruin. He stood quietly at her side, a silent sentinel, his presence commanding a safeguard she couldn't quite reconcile with the chaos she felt within. "And your decision, Miss Jensen," one of them prompted, his voice smooth as silk yet sharp enough to cut through the thick tension. Violet hesitated, feeling the weight of expectation pressing down upon her. The proposition was one she couldn't in good conscience refuse, but agreeing bound her even tighter to their machinations. "I understand what is expected of me," she murmured, choosing her words as carefully as one might place stepping stones over a perilous path. With a nod, the men moved on, their conversation ebbing and flowing like a tide she struggled to navigate without losing herself. Outside, the snow continued its relentless descent, flakes settling in her hair like stars from a fallen constellation. Her night's rest offered no reprieve, only dreams filled with riddles and forebodings. The days that followed were stitched together by tension and surveillance. Violet was acutely aware of the eyes that shadowed her every move, their gaze a constant reminder of the stakes she played for. In solitary moments, she cradled the leather-bound book against her chest, searching its pages for any missed clues, patterns she hadn't yet pieced together. The ledger was a map she followed with increasing caution, each entry a step deeper into a realm of power tempered with danger. Yet, there was a secret joy in seeing threads begin to weave together. Stories she had known only from the safe comfort of fiction, now playing out with her as the unwitting heroine. This was no tale of princes or paupers, but of deception and unmasking. On the evening of the rendezvous, her hands trembled as she secured the final clasp of her coat. Doubt clawed at her resolve, yet beneath it all, a quiet determination thrummed, a recognition of truth she couldn't yet articulate. He met her just past dusk, the street lights casting his shadow long and slender. The tranquility of his expression was a balm to her fraying nerves. "It's time," he stated simply, voice a thread binding them together. She nodded, fighting the swell of emotions threatening to undo her own. Side by side, they threaded through the city's veins, their destination clear yet weighted with uncertainty. The cold air was invigorating, each breath a reminder of life's precarious nature. Here, amidst this frozen tableau, Violet felt the weight of destiny's watchful eye. As they reached the appointed place, a derelict factory lit only by the fractured light of distant stars, an unspoken understanding passed between them. "It will end here," he assured her. But Violet sensed layers to his words, a future tinged with shades of consequence yet unseen. Inside, the space was cavernous, echoing footsteps an eerie soundtrack to this clandestine meeting. At its heart, a figure waited. Searching her soul for reassurance, Violet moved forward, the sound of her boots on cold cement a rhythmic testament to her commitment. "Miss Jensen," the figure greeted with a hint of expectation. "I trust you've decided?" With an air lent gravity by her silent journey, Violet began to speak, her voice unwavering, replete with the authority of those who have finally found the core of their determination. "I will not play your game of shadows," she declared, and silence followed her words like an eager hound. The shock was palpable. Even the air seemed to react, pausing in anticipation of repercussions yet to manifest. The truth at last took form, a power unwritten but omnipresent, charging the stillness with its infinite weight. His response was measured yet poignant, every syllable a subtle dance of acknowledgement and admiration. Her defiance wasn't just unexpected, it was respected, albeit silently. "You are brave," he remarked, not unkindly, and the dialogue turned towards paths of parting and unforeseen alliances. Resolution settled as oppression gave way to understanding, a shared recognition lighting the dim recesses of intent between them. And as they stood at the precipice of departure, a lingering note of finality hovered between breaths. "You've changed the story, Violet. What will you write next?" he whispered, the question a paradox, both a challenge and a gift. In the fading light, Violet felt the gravity of her choice, weaving the threads of past and future with deliberate precision. A feeling of unfamiliar freedom unfurled like petals reaching for dawn, touching even the darkest corners of her once captive spirit. For the time being, she was content. Change was inevitable, but she'd embraced it on her terms. The world outside spun with a tumult of burgeoning daylight, but Violet remained poised, grounded in certainty as real as the breath she drew. Then, with a gesture that painted possibility into the air, he stepped back, shadow merging with substance. A whisper passed through them, shared foreknowledge of stories untold, dancing on the horizon like dawn freshly broken. Their eyes met one final time, whispering promises yet to be made, truth still to be unveiled. And then, with the fabric of night retreating, a curtain of quiet fell over the scene, charged with an energy electric with potential. "Until next time," he murmured, his silhouette a silhouette marked by faint starlight. Violet watched him fade into the awakening dawn, sensing a new narrative poised to bloom amidst the unfolding shadows. An echo of a promise lingered in the afterthought of his absence, anchoring her to the possibilities of a path yet dug. Moving forward, a striking realization took root. She was a part of this fable, shaping legends only just conceived. And as dawn kissed the horizon with a quiet shiver, she turned toward a future shaped not by what had been, but by what would be. Then, caught on the delicate edge of new beginnings, she spied a ghostly silhouette in her peripheral vision, moving like an apparition through the snowy haze, whispering tales of a mystery unsolved. "We have to go," he commanded. urgency coloring his voice as he grabbed Violet's wrist, his touch ironclad. Through the window of the small, dim-lit cafe where they had taken refuge, glimpses of black SUVs and suited shadows made her pulse quicken. The atmosphere lay thick with tension, a slow-burning fuse to the powder keg of decisions. Her once predictable life docked between dusty bookshelves and the romantic inclinations of customers' stories now danced along the razor's edge. Violet, with her auburn curls fluttering like flames against the darkening skyline, had transitioned from bystander to participant in the chess game of life and death. As they dashed into the night, memories of warm familiarity flickered, jasmine tea wafting through the bookshop, the crisp crackle of pages as they turned. Visions of comforts left behind contrasted starkly with the icy wind nipping at her, propelling them forward. The man's grip, steady yet reassuring, guided her through the clandestine network of alleys. Violet, underestimated in circles of sharp efficiency and covert results, now found herself at a precipice of her own making. He slowed their pace as they reached the narrow, weathered door of a rundown loft. The nondescript exterior belied the sanctuary it cloaked within. Here, in the quiet hallways of the underground safe house, tension tapered into a hushed disbelief sprinkled with hope, a sharp contrast to external forces clutching at their freedom. They entered the loft. Wood floors creaked with stories held in their grain, mingling with the low hum of weathered radiators and the heavy musk of aging fabric. "We need a plan," he asserted, his voice low but firm, hues of his unyielding resolve staining the silence. Amidst these tattered surroundings, Violet found her resolve blooming silently, guided by the compass of necessity, cutting through the wing of uncertainty that clouded their path. "Violet," he spoke, drawing her from musings painted with sepia undertones. "There's something you need to know." His words hung between them like secrets weighted with the unseen. "Tell me everything," she replied, grounding herself in the resolve visible in his eyes, shadowed by stakes they were yet to understand. The dim afternoon shifted, shadows lengthening as he laid out the puzzle pieces, an intricate web of alliances and betrayals, balances of power drawn in whispers and subverted glances. Each piece fell into place, a ledger revealing more than monetary exchanges, names and dates mapping motives sensed yet unseen. This crisis stretched beyond them, reaching its tendrils through the city's solo confrontation, long simmering. Their discussion, laced with muted tones of urgency and defiance, mirrored a dance of wills, weaving a tapestry knit in fear but bordered by determination. Confusion rippled, followed by a cool clarity isolating the chief antagonist, once ally, now adversary. A parade of misdirection had kept truths at bay, a veil Violet was ready to shred. Fiction had equipped Violet with insight. Every tale she'd absorbed lent her a key grasp on human nature. She realized her strength in perception had been honed long before stepping beyond the familiar room. Courage, keen as steel, rose within her, fueled by understanding of what must occur. A truth, hidden like a splinter nestled beneath skin, emerged. They'd face their adversary, not in shadows, but eye to eye, guided by the knowledge they alone possessed. Their departure carried urgency as tension swirled in the loft, history preparing to fold into its next act. She emerged into the street, his certainty surrounding her like whispers from the dark. Steps synchronized with intent peeled back the layers of conspiracy. Together they embarked on the night's swirl, the city a silent specter, watching breath held. Dodging shadows on cobblestones, they were drawn to a warehouse where destiny awaited. Their side-by-side strides cracked static frames of light into fluid action, seeking the separate truth that would seal their fate. Under the cavernous ceiling, truths waiting to emerge paused as they approached those hidden under guised faces of fear, masquerading under falsehoods. Violet stood firm in the center, quiet authority spilling from her gaze, a strength traced in quiet endurance born from chaotic currents. "We end this now," she declared, words punctuating the silence, charged with the static anticipation of revelation. Her antagonist stood revealed, a figure encased in shadows now split by light. Deceit unraveled beneath the clarity of unveiled intention. Color drained beneath the floodlights. Sincerity unmasking layers as concealed truths turned to ash amid startled realization. Done, he confirmed. Consequence, pulling visions into reality, shifting allegiances prescribed by urgency's script. The warehouse quieted, breath eclipsing pandemonium, truth solidifying under the weight of its debut. He turned to Violet, acknowledgement etched into his features, a silent tribute to her defiance shaping the inevitable. Wrapped in night, she stood sure-footed, understanding eyes cast upon silent histories echoing beyond defeat. Their latest act closed, a prelude as yet unwritten stretched out within the chorus of muted stars blazing overhead. As they emerged from the shadowed meeting, delicate snowfall dotted the city and intricate choreography cast across streets as beacons across destiny's threads. The path of return sketched in gentle grace, step by step traced patterns of new beginnings. Violet looked onward, infinite skies tethered to possibilities unfurling further than thoughts could grasp. "Let's go," he whispered, lips barely moving, grave propriety suspended through mutual resolution. Her choice defined, marked by hints of shadow blending seamlessly into light, heralded the motif of blossoms turning toward dawn. And there, upon the edge of unimagined horizons, the strand of snow wove the arts of dusk, crafting their future on plains of untouched twilight. A single shadow fell across Violet's path, cast from the distant haze of light more than an outline. It whispered presence in guise of absence. Snow clung to their clothes like whispers from a world untouched by chaos as they neared the building, its stone facade a spectral monument against the city lights. "This ends tonight," he said, his voice a quiet roar in the silent chill. Violet felt those words brush her skin like a commandment passed down through generations, echoes of fate curling around her bones. Her breath crystallized in the frigid air as they paused before the entrance, the shadowed monolith stretching high above, obscured stars watching with bated breath. Behind them the city sprawled, a maze pulsating with the same life force that now thudded in her chest. Her fingers twitched against the crime-laden institution of reality, the insurgent bookshop girl lost amidst the high stakes drawn like axes across the night. Her courage, forged in the furnace of necessity, had emerged stubborn and glowing. And yet, behind the meticulous facade, her resolve fluttered on faltering wings, similar shadows sharpening the crest of a lion's den they were about to enter. Inside was a world where dialogue slung like weapons, and each step marked a choice between fate and freedom. Here she was known not by her deeds but by the weight of secrets, slumbering beneath her skin, an archive of hopes scarcely dared, unvoiced desires taut like harp strings, silencing the symphony of fear. A hushed murmur swept the lobby as they stepped through the revolving doors, warm air wrapping around them as if defying the chill outside. The chandelier overhead was a galaxy of crystal shards, glinting with disdain as it cast its fractured illumination. Violet moved with practiced determination, her senses amplified, skin humming to tunes of anticipation. She was a painting in motion, no longer defined by the frame she had been confined to, each brushstroke a note in the symphonic chaos. "Welcome," a voice cut through the murmur, pulling the air taut around those gathered representatives, cloaked in allegiances and desires. The one in charge moved forward, his presence a calculated weight. Each stride controlled, he regarded Violet with an unreadable expression, yes, peeled not to see, but to unearth. Here, decisions murmured beneath a layered fabric of presents and pasts, the stakes woven into every word awaiting utterance. Violet, conscious of the glazed attention, stood unyielding against the scrutiny teeming around her. "Have you reconsidered your position?" he inquired, insidious curiosity tipping the scales with a smile that masqueraded as genuine interest. "I'm more certain than ever," Violet responded, her voice resonating with underlying currents, swift as the river beneath a frozen surface, her gaze resting on him with unbrushed defiance. The confirmation registered like a tapestry unfurling in slow motion before every eye, drawing invisible lines and recalibrating the balance of intentions. A fleeting ripple of surprise twisted the leader's features before being swallowed by an inevitability that crept at his edges. Obstacles rose swiftly as he moved closer, conscious of a tenuous balance now shifted and tilted precariously. A silence followed, pregnant with emotional storm brewing under strained smiles and nuanced nods of respect. a shifting tapestry in a carpeted pavilion, as elusive as fortune and fate. Violet's companions, once shadows, materialized strategically positioned, aligning themselves with an unseen order. Each balanced on the razor wire in turn, mirrored by the same secrecy that had walked inside. Every inch of the room dripped in the scent of promises born from desperation and marinated in patience. The exchange of glances flickered with the weight of unspoken truths, and for a moment, realignment mapped memories, transforming them into ink, drawing on destiny's canvas. "You challenge intricate paths," he remarked quietly, a mouth crafting intentions neither condemning nor encouraging. Paradoxical mind. Violet tilted her head, acknowledging the understated dance. Her journey had been a crescent song in the night's resolute whisper, navigating strengths and limits while defying the gravity of expectation. The resolution coalesced into words, no longer restrained by secrecy. The amalgam of metamorphosis unveiled one furrowed brow at a time. The assembly was an intertwining of webs, each strand a destiny weighed and watched, threads finely spun in the loom of life's intricate corridors. There was intuition enveloped in their engagement, lost narratives wrapped in discovery. Violet blinked, understanding the space inside now belonged to her as much as to them. The cloak she wore bespoke the power she chose in staking her course. She saw reflected rivals curbed by respect, their mechanisms thwarted by sincerity, unpredictable as the snow continuing to weave its drapery outside. And then, in a shift so subtle yet so profound, Violet realized the essence beyond their dance was not entrapment, but liberation, freedom derived from the unforeseen, liberation weighed ambitiously and courageously navigated. A clock chimed distantly, the sound a bell tolled in recognition or confession, perhaps both a haunting cadence reverberating through those gathered, touching the air with tendrils of transformation, yet waiting to unfold. He spoke again, his tone a tide both retracting and inviting. "What lies beyond this night, Violet? What will you unveil for us as history begins anew?" Her smile held the warmth of an igniting sun, memories interwoven with crimson threads, future narratives yet inscribed. "Will and choice," she replied, electrified conviction unearthing a warmth where frost had settled too long. The ensemble of fate exhaled as a new score etched its signature across their minds, revealing veins of possibilities veined with life. Finally, a gesture, simple, contemplative, a hand lifting, offering not end, but beginning a declaration of celestial cycles turning ever onward. The meeting's crescendo snapped into silence. Paths drafted and altered during that irreplaceable instant between what was and what might yet be. Violet absorbed the silence, her gaze an arithmetic of moral echoes and promises exchanged, memories transfigured beneath dawning skies. She left the hall with deliberate steps, his silent accompaniment, the tether that had spun across shadowy hallways, a steadfast beacon, guiding toward luminous worlds. Outside, the night air embraced them with whispers of what could be, the tentative touch of fresh beginnings melting upon breaths sent spiraling skyward. "Where do we go from here?" he asked, the city unfurling endless possibilities beneath their gaze, a vast quilt stitched with uncharted adventures awaiting pen to page. "We follow the light wherever it leads," Violet answered, offering a promise of change. Their silhouettes wove perfectly amidst snowfall, merging toward tomorrow's tapestry, craft of intentions pieced together beneath silent harmonies. As the city's chorus wove itself into a tapestry only they could translate, Violet saw the flickering flame illuminate newfound horizons, their potential awaiting the stroke of dawn. A distant silhouette approached, its form indistinguishable, but its intent cloaked in shades of intrigue emerging from the surrounding gloom. Silence stretched out, woven into expectation. A gesture, a thumb turned up in moonlight, ambiguous but palpable beneath the weight of stars. And with that, the night carried on, clutching secrets only shadows could understand. A single rose lay in the snow, its rich crimson defying the pale blanket that covered the city in silence. Violet's breath caught as she paused, captivated by the fragile bloom and omen, she thought, of the lives poised on the brink. This was no ordinary night. She could feel it in the marrow of her bones, in the rhythm of the city's heartbeat, which pounded with an urgency that was inescapable. As she breathed in the crisp electric air, the smell of iron hung heavily, mingling with the sweet decay of old leaves hidden beneath the snow. Her mind was a storm of confusion and clarity intermingling like dancers at a masquerade, identities obscured, motives unclear. She had been underestimated, dismissed by those wielding power as if she were a pawn in their grand game. Yet here she was, standing defiant on the verge of something monumental. Her curiosity had led her down winding paths and shadowed corridors, and now as dawn threatened the horizon, she felt a reckoning looming. The building before her loomed like a stone colossus, its windows dark and ominous, concealing secrets whispered through the city's tangled webs. The pressure had built slowly like water behind a dam. It was here, standing in the threshold of fate, that she faced the final test of her resolve. Inside, the grand hall awaited, its secrets shrouded in shadow, a tapestry of alliances and ambitions hidden behind silk and velvet. She took a breath, steadying herself as she entered. The cavernous room swallowed sound, every step a thunderclap in the silence. Across the parquet floor, figures watched her, their gazes probing, dissecting. Her heart thundered, echoing the sense of awe and intimidation. Here she was amidst the titans of this clandestine world, a mere clerk on the outside, but now key to the unraveling fabric of hidden empires. Eyes followed her as she crossed towards him, the man who had been both mentor and enigma, his presence a lighthouse cutting through the fog of uncertainty. The leader's table was but a short walk, yet felt like a journey of 1,000 decisions and second thoughts. She dared a glance around, and the opulent setting was almost absurd against the stark reality of her crusade. Chandeliers reflected fractured rainbows, casting iridescent patterns on walls too used to whispered secrets and reluctant confessions. And then he was before her. "Are you ready, Violet?" His question was soft, a thread of warmth in the icy tableau. Her answer was a nod, born of silent affirmations crafted in the echoes of solitude. "Whatever comes," she replied, her voice a steel cord tempered by experience and resolve. The moment stretched like a painted canvas, each stroke meticulous and meaning-bound. They exchanged simple words, weighted by the gravity of impending choices. Obstacles littered her path as the past clawed at the edges of her conscience. Faces she recognized, punctuated by unknown expressions of anticipation and dread. She could feel his confidence waver, twisted by the potential of newfound truths that had the power to tip their carefully balanced scales. The eyes of the room bore witness as a sealed envelope slid across the polished table, its importance striking as a judge's gavel. Here lay the fulcrum of their fate, teetering on the precipice with precarious poise. A figure emerged from the shadows, a ghostly presence flecked with memories of fights fought and won, and Violet felt the tension ripple through the space like a stone casting circles in still water. "The ledger," he whispered, voice a coiled serpent of promises yet concealed and threats unvoiced. Violet's hand gripped the document, the paper cool against fevered skin. Here was her moment, her chance to flip the narrative she had been woven into with unwilling hands. With a deft move, the seal was broken. The contents spilled like a river unleashed from its burdens, washing away the facade to reveal a map, connections mapped in ink, alliances perfumed with deceit now rendered achingly clear. A collective inhale met the revelation. The gallery of power and persuasion understood, in that suspended breath, that tides had turned. "This isn't the end," Violet stated, each word clear and unmistakable. "This is just the beginning." Her declaration was met with silence pregnant with awe, a reversal she cradled gently yet firmly, bent into a new direction by her quiet courage. The theatricality of the moment resonated like a timeless sonata, watched over by histories lined in tapestry threads and ghostlight. With a flourish, she stepped back, eye-meeting gaze, the understanding rippling across space, a commitment to a future rewritten by hands once bound by fear. As the assembly parted, scattering like leaves before the breeze, Violet felt the weight of their scrutiny lift, replaced by the buoyancy of her new path. He approached her then, his shadow a welcoming cloak that wrapped around her weary form. "You've done it," he murmured, respect threaded through his tone, a salve for the doubt that lingered too near. Yet the night could not end without its obligatory whisper of foreshadowing, a reminder that the dance was far from completed. She turned, gazing into the distance, watching as the city twinkled beneath the emerging stars, sparkling promises of what dawn might hold. Then, sure as the curl of frost upon the earth, came the soft rustle of wings, and the night exhaled a crisp breath that whispered around them. His last words hung in the air, a curiosity-drenched note drawing an unsteady line between certainty and the yawning unknown beyond. "Let the whispers be your guide," he murmured, walking into the snow-muffled silence, leaving her with one unanswerable question drifting between shadow and twilight. A soft gasp escaped her lips, piercing the stillness of the dawn that stretched before her as a harbinger of things yet untold. Where Lily once stood on uncertain grounds, she now faced a horizon that weaved in tendrils of silver hope and eerie shadows. The scene played out against a backdrop of the city's waking heart, its arteries pulsing with hidden stories, straining at the seams of conventional anonymity. The stone monolith of a building loomed in her periphery, silhouetted against a sky ablaze with subtler fire, a representation of the internal war she had long grappled with silently. Violet Jensen, a name whispered with both reverence and skepticism across the winding paths of this life, once nothing but faint echoes in rooms heavy with leather-bound volumes and dusty mornings. Now she carried within her an unanticipated transformation, a metamorphosis wrapped in quiet elegance and profound resolve. Even seated quietly within the luxurious confines of her newfound space, she could feel the charged atmosphere press against her skin as if the very walls themselves hatched secrets of her own weaving. Her gentle features rested against the fine line between anticipation and serenity, her mind a tempest of calculation tempered with compassion. In the ballroom where once grand mischief had shrouded masked ambitions, shadows danced along gilded walls as she awaited the convocation of silent understandings. Elegant tapestries told tales of exuberance and loss, hanging like audible echoes sewn silently into the surroundings themselves. Fate had been desperate to mimic the epic sagas she'd fantasized alongside mahogany bookshelves. It had painted a reality more vivid than fiction, and one far more terrifying. Across the hall, figures began to arrive, men and women of power, their expressions concealed beneath the veneer of civility. Their movements synchronized with the tense rhythm of the stakes now laid bare beneath their feet. A cataclysm awaited, ripening beneath the thin fabric of this truce disguised politeness, interlacing silent aggressions and veiled collusions. Violet stood at the epicenter, where inevitability and choice waged their silent duel. Her thoughts flickered to the cryptic note discovered not weeks earlier, a coded puzzle etched and scrawled with a deceptively simple elegance, a linchpin for the unmasking, yet untouched by daring hands. The atmosphere thickened as the assembly grew, conversations tangled like tendrils, each stray word hosting the weight of unexamined motives and potential disclosures. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with notes of leather as anticipation knitted itself into the air. Violet's eyes swept across those present, lingering on the constellation of players, each a crucial piece in the mosaic unfolding before her. Choreographed mastery marked the new age she was about to usher. With deliberate grace, she moved through the assembly towards the heart of the impending storm, a gentle yet resolute figure painted against the surreal stage of fate. "Shall we begin?" spoke a voice void of urgency yet laden with authority, phrased by the presence whose every whisper dictated the dark and dangerous undercurrent grappling beneath their feet. As lanterns furred with shadows creaked through the machinery of whispers, Violet centered herself. Here, beneath an eternity of fragile chandeliers and eyes steeled through whispers of uncertainty, she knew the plan she'd devised was both braver and more perilous than ever dared. A subtle shift in the air, an urgency infused by long past and cracking present, hung caught upon the eve ready to tread into destiny. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the knowledge of all she'd learned, a lifetime condensed into such pivotal moments where every breath bore consequence. Above, the chandelier flickered in silent conspiracy, a symphony of hues poised to shatter impotent glamour before dawning clarity. Reality had unfolded in accordion rustles of tactful revelation and disclosed truths no longer imprisoned in shadows. At that moment, Violet fiercely glimmered under the luminescent crush of weights long resigned to breaking constraints. Determination loud though echoed miracles spun through her soul, a choice clinched resonant in the hall. If this is the threshold we've reached, she declared with measured grace, her voice hot with truth, let it also be a beginning. A new path built not from deception, but through acknowledgement and trust, fragile as they may seem. Faces turned, emotions sprawling in ripples crashing against foundations of hierarchy polished by grim expectation. Her words lanced into the tapestry like sparks seeking kindling beneath layers of long-spun protection. His eyes met her own, threads of admiration woven through uncertainty as they balanced on cusp and brink. What you suggest, began the voice at the other end, a hint of smile drawn reluctantly in scandalous admiration. It's revolutionary, maybe improbable. Yet somehow, Violet interrupted him not with speech, but with the assurance that danced within her expression, a silent symphony painting, certainty of purpose indelibly against fraying walls. Eager murmurs wove a chorus among those standing amidst the promise of chaos. Her challenge birthed unanticipated harmony, battered within contested storm. Outside, the world wrapped itself in the burgeoning light, each ray a silent harbinger of transformations, no longer pinned to disheartened strings. And as the shadows retreated in reluctant release, life nestled softly beneath dreams she never entirely trusted. It baptized the audacity in those prepared to embrace unprecedented tomorrows. Do you believe thee, then, he asked, once mentor, now usher to trajectories unhurriedly scribbling themselves into records not yet written? She offered no answer but serenity, unbroken by trepidation, kissed only by the resolve that summoned from somewhere sacred. In what surely was to be her favored recollection, Violet stepped back, absent only doubt returning initiated transformation to cradle her in intended arms. The night released its breath, etched with light permeating through tumult, concealed even less by the soft caress of its clarity. Reflections spun gaily through mirthful windows, beckoning infinity forged from blooming Genesis poised to arc into the rising dawn. In the silent aftermath of faith expressed in quiet resolution, Violet turned away from the glimmers of deconstructing bygone darkness. But as sure as the city shimmered beneath burgeoning skies, a shadow moved out a silhouette both cocktail and presence, refusing dissolution into light. And then, a voice, flecked with colorings not quite touching daylight, lingered unresolved in warm refrain. Meet me where dusk leaves her velvet shells.